Hello everyone and welcome to Keen Ear. Now at first I thought about maybe naming this video 3 bad songs that appear on great albums, but I don't necessarily think these are bad songs really, although some people out there might disagree with that. I think they're more like songs that don't quite stack up quite as well as the other songs that appear on these sort of like universally regarded sort of great albums. So let's start with the first one, and I've gone for my money at least the most obvious inclusion you could really have. It's certainly the first thing to spring to my mind, on this sort of subject, and it's found on Abbey Road, and it's Octopus's Garden. Now generally I don't really have a problem with Ringo sort of vocal tracks on Beatles albums. I actually kind of like them. I feel like they add a different dimension to the Beatles sound overall, and it also as well it sort of reinforces the idea that the Beatles were kind of at least somewhat diplomatic in sharing the limelight. It would have been very easy for Paul and John in particular to say to Ringo and George, you just play the guitar or the drums or whatever, and we'll kind of take care of everything else. We'll deal with pretty much everything else. And that happens to so many groups and that kind of thing, and it's usually, it usually is the start of, groups sort of unraveling and infighting and jealousy and all that kind of thing. But the Beatles, at least to some degree, nobody can deny that wasn't the case. There was some, there was some sharing of the spotlight and that kind of thing. And not just with the albums, but it was with the when the Beatles performed live as well. So I think that was beneficial, and I think that was a good thing overall. But I think I kind of draw the line now with Octopus's Garden on Abbey Road, because I feel like it just doesn't really fit in for me with the rest of the album. The album is such a grand piece, such an epic, and it's up there with like Sgt. Pepper and that kind of thing. It's one of the Beatles' big sort of sounding albums. Big epic sort of pieces really, and it just doesn't quite fit in. At least I don't feel it does with the rest of the stuff. Now this does have some silly stuff on it. It's not the Octopus's Garden isn't the only kind of silly track on here. It does have Maxwell's Silver Hammer, of course, which is amongst a couple of others, stuff like Polythene Palm as well, and Me, Mr. Mustard, they're kind of a bit silly too. But Maxwell's Silver Hammer is the other one where kind of people pointing the finger at. But I think that works a little bit better, and I kind of feel like that has more of a place on this album because I think it's just a stronger track in general, and I think it just adds a little bit of extra something to it, which Octopus's Garden just doesn't have. So yeah, that's the first track I've decided to go for on Abbey Road, is Octopus's Garden. So moving on now to the next choice, and it's from this album, Axis Bold as Love by the Jimi Hendrix Experience, and it's the opening track, which I believe is called EXP, and it's like a spoof sort of Alien radio track really, and it's just kind of a bit silly. I always thought it was a bit silly, and it was a bit sort of overly long and a bit, it's kind of, you can kind of tell that Jimmy really was a young guy when he was recording these albums. He was only in his 20s. He didn't really get to see, anything past, his late 20s, unfortunately. But he was a young guy. It's only his second album. You can kind of see that he's kind of just messing about really and having a bit of fun. And yeah, I think I'm not necessarily against it for that reason. I can kind of let him off for being young and that kind of thing and having a bit of fun. But I feel like EXP just slows the album down too much. Right at the very beginning, the opening track, and I feel like it just slows everything down. And for that reason, I think it probably would have been better suited on like a B-side, to a 45 release, rather than the opening track to a studio album. So anyway, that's my next choice, EXP from the Jimi Hendrix Experience, Axis Bold as Love. Final choice is from this album, Hunky Dory. For my money at least, David Bowie's best album. And the one track I've gone for this is a cover track, and it's Fill Your Heart on side 2. It's the opening track on side 2. Yeah, and I've never been a huge fan of this track, to say the least. In fact, when I'm thinking about whether or not I consider this to be, you know, one of my favourite albums ever made, which I do, you know, the rest of the tracks sort of win me over. I always think maybe it's not because of, you know, Fill Your Heart. Fill Your Heart's always the one where, you know, is it really my favourite when I was Fill Your Heart? And because it's just a track I just don't particularly think is all that great. It's not necessarily bad. I think, you know, it's better than anything on, you know, Bowie's first album, that's for definitely sure. And I think it's better than a lot of stuff he did in the 80s in particular, which is just kind of very boring. But Fill Your Heart on this just doesn't really stack up for my money compared to the rest of the songs on here, which are, you know, some of Bowie's best and some of the best, you know, tracks ever made. So yeah, Fill Your Heart. I know a lot of people putting the finger at Kooks, I've noticed, which is actually a Bowie, you know, he actually wrote that track. But I think that track actually is kind of charming. I think it suits the album kind of well, and it fits in with everything a lot better than Fill Your Heart. I just don't really like that track that much, really. Not that it's terrible, not that any of these tracks are terrible or anything like that. Like I've kind of made clear, they're just not quite as good as the rest of the stuff on here. So that's it. Fill Your Heart. I'm only going to be doing 3. You know, 3 kind of like came to mind initially. I thought about maybe looking into doing some more, but I kind of want to leave this open a bit. You know, if you want to, you know, add yours, you want to make a response video, maybe it's fine. I don't think I'm the first person to ever think about doing this, but I don't think it's been done in a while or whatever. And if you want to add in the comments or anything like that, any tracks that you think deserve a mention and that sort of thing. But I kind of went over the 3, particularly the Octopus's Garden on Abbey Road. I think that really is the biggie for me anyway. The other 2 are kind of like a little bit maybe not as well, you know, not as prime examples really. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I think this is something that's open for debate for anybody who wants to take part and that sort of thing. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.